Questioning is a process used by educators and students to engage in learning. In a remote learning environment, educators can design questions that increase engagement and manage their workload. Students can develop questioning skills to access knowledge, collaborate, and show their thinking. Effective questioning techniques foster quality classroom discussions. As a result, students develop and utilize critical thinking while increasing student talk, collaboration, engagement, and depth of learning. As you review the outcomes of this presentation, consider the essential question: in what ways can I use questioning practices to engage my students in remote learning? In a remote setting, educator-generated questions can provide a focus for learning, encourage students to show their thinking, and help students access new learning. Tip number 1, keep questions clear and focused. In a remote environment, make sure students understand what is being asked. Phrasing and format are important. When using questions via electronic communication, separate the question using text features. Point the way to ensure that the question is clear and focused. Tip number 2, ask essential questions that lead to authentic conversation. Essential questions are universal questions worthy of exploration. In a remote environment, we can use them before and after learning to facilitate meaningful tasks and student discourse. Using essential questions in a remote environment provides students with an opportunity to connect to real life experiences in their real life context. Tip number 3, ask closed ended questions to access prior learning and check for understanding. Educators already know the answers to closed ended questions. The purpose in asking them is for us to assess and for students to reactivate understanding. We can ask these questions to groups or individuals in synchronous sessions. We can also place them at the beginning of a self paced task. Tip number 4, ask open ended questions to stimulate critical and creative thinking. Open-ended questions can be a starting point for student discourse. In the D303 playbook, linked in the resources section of this folder, you will find strategies for asking closed-ended and open-ended questions to recall prior learning, support students as they revise their ideas, and stimulate critical thinking and discourse. To help intentionally pre-plan your closed-ended questions and open-ended questions, HyperDocs can be a helpful tool. In the HyperDocs and Choice Boards templates located in the Resources section of this folder, you will find that closed-ended questions serve to help students access prior knowledge and identify what they don't know. Open-ended questions can be used to apply, share, reflect, and extend. Sometimes students struggle to articulate what they need to know about a topic because of unfamiliarity or lack of background knowledge. This makes it difficult for them to generate questions. With HyperDocs, you can use videos or images to give context for student-generated questions. Tip number 5, ask questions that build relationships and assess student self-perception. When we want to check in on our students to make connections, we can ask questions that have yes or no or selected response options. In synchronous sessions, we can use polls in the chat feature or invite students to use emojis, self-made signs, or give hand signals. In asynchronous lesson design, we can ask questions using polls to collect evidence and build social presence. When students generate their own questions, they take control of their learning by establishing purpose and confronting confusion. They also engage meaningfully with new learning and build critical thinking skills. Tip number 6, teach students to question everything. Students know school is where they go to answer questions. They may not realize that they should be asking questions too. The question formulation technique, which is linked in the resources section of this folder, is one way to explicitly teach students how to generate questions to clarify and extend their learning. Like sentence stems, question starters provide support for students to construct their inquiries. Whether you create your own or use one of the many examples from a Google search, keep in mind the following. Model using question starters. Less is more. Share a few starters, not the entire list. Provide visual cues as much as possible to accompany question starters. Reflect on when question starters are necessary. Avoid over-scaffolding. A link to this infographic is available in the resources section of this folder. Tip number 7, guide student questioning by identifying the thinking you want. Suggesting criteria students might use to reflect on their learning will provide a purpose and direction, and you will raise the level of student questioning. Students could form questions to connect to previous learning, evaluate information, clarify assumptions, identify biases, analyze errors or confusion, find gaps in information, and extend an idea. Tip number 8, activate or build background knowledge to prepare students to ask meaningful questions. Before we expect students to ask good questions, we need to make sure they have background information. For instance, KWL is often used to track learning throughout a unit of study, but students with little knowledge of the topic will understandably struggle to generate questions for the What I Want to Learn column, especially early in the unit. Use a variety of methods to build background for students. Text, videos, images, audio, models, experience are all different ways that you can use methods to build background. Padlet and ThingLink are two Web 2.0 approved tools you can use to build background knowledge and facilitate students to generate their own questions. Check out the resource section of this folder for tutorials on these tools. Tip number 9, plan deliberate ways students can generate and discuss their questions. As students view a video in Edpuzzle, they can both answer questions they are wondering about. Using Google Jamboard, a digital whiteboard, small groups can collaborate on their questions. As students discuss a topic in Flipgrid, they can use sticky notes. You can also use Google Forms and slides to encourage student questioning. Links to tutorials on all of these tools and platforms can be found in the resources section of this folder. In this module, you explore the ways that you can use questioning practices to engage your students in remote learning through educator-generated questions as well as student-generated questions.